Just to give a little history, I think, Rachel, we started this 5 years ago, and it was it's sort of more formalized now as sort of a series of information sessions for families, but this was always the first one, and it's really thinking about, as a progressive school, what does assessment look like? In a week, you're going to be getting narrative reports, not grades, and it feels like when we're talking about what we believe is better ways of assessing students versus some more traditional ways, it's important to be really transparent about what that looks like. And I always ask, and I always ask, not anymore, and I always ask different teachers to speak each year so that people can hear from different perspectives, and you also, or maybe you don't know, they can introduce themselves. We have a range of teachers from pre-K through 4th and 5th grade, and I also ask for both general education teachers and special education teachers to come speak. So some teachers who are teaching by themselves in the classroom with support from paraprofessionals in some cases in our pre-K situation, and some teachers who teach with a co-teacher. So I really think it's important for people to hear from the real range of models and teachers in our room. And so with that, I think I can hand it off. We usually go around, but just because we are running a little bit late, I think we should just start. I always ask the teachers just to share a little bit, and we usually begin with the early childhood, and we make our way up, and then we can open it up to questions once teachers are finished. Okay. So you guys want to just first introduce yourselves, and then we'll have one to start. Okay. And I just want to say also just how much. What?
I was just going to say hand the mic. We're going to
we're going to try the mic. If people don't feel comfortable with the mic, I will hold the mic. I'm totally fine with that. This was not something that I had remembered and prepared the teachers for, the video component of this. And
You were saying that you were gonna introduce ourselves.
Yeah,
That was it.
Okay, so I am Maria Joseta. I am the pre-K teacher right now.
I'm Jean Taylor, and I teach 2nd and 3rd grade.
I'm Joanne Shabilia, and I teach 4th and 5th grade.
I'm Diane. I teach kindergarten and 1st grade.
I know what I wanted to say. I'm really grateful to you guys for coming and sharing this element of your practice. Thank you.
So can they use the mic? Can they use it?
Oh, okay.
Just, I know that.
For you if you want me to.
That's okay. I'll hold it. Like this?
That's fine.
Okay. So in my case, since I have the little ones, I have to talk about the importance of observation and documentation. And that is the best way that we can assess children. I'm just going to read it a little bit. I didn't know I was going to be videotaped. Okay, so observing the children in our care is a way for us to better understand the strengths that the children have and also things that they are still developing. Our observations also guide us, and in many ways we can make adjustments to the environment, and also we facilitate learning. And I have to say this is a one-of-a-kind thing because then it's like a personalized learning experience that we give to the children. However, that does not mean that children are going to be assessed individually. It's just something that we do, and we make a group out of it, and everyone is included, but of course, we also have like a goal. Also, regular observation and careful analysis of the children's behavior and personality traits help us bring a stronger relationship with the children, meaning building trust, not just with the children, also with the families, which is very important. Tracking the progress. Once we start our observation in early childhood, we can be able to monitor the progress of the child's development over time. So we can see how they first started, how they continue to progress in the middle of the year, and then we can actually see the progress towards the end of the year. Some of the components that we use to progress this is the teacher's descriptions. We describe the children, we write down their little observations that we then turn it into those reports that you guys get. We also have samples of work like their writing in the beginning of the year, and then towards the middle, and then in the end. You get most of it, but we actually observe these things, and that's how you get the portfolios towards the end. But we still have the portfolios. They're very important. Also, a lot of the children's comments when they are working together in groups. If we're making a science experiment, we want to see what they're doing, their questions, their comments, and we observe all of that either through videos, pictures, which is very important. We make a lot of transcriptions and conversations during the conversations that they have in small groups. Also, very important items of observation, like experience, development. Let's say, for example, oh, today Johnny wrote his name, and it's very important for us, and we document it with the date so that you can see that. Some of the things that we, to consider in the categories, the things that we observe are the children's cognitive, social emotional development, their physical development is very important, and their language skills. And that's pretty much what I have to share.
I'm Diane again. I teach kindergarten, first grade, ICT. I was thinking about assessment because of this meeting, and we're also doing a lot of that right now because it's the middle of the year. But I think the most important thing I use assessment for is to know what the child is able to do, so I know what to do next for that child. So I'm going to describe some formal assessments that we do and that we start in kindergarten. For reading, we have 2 or 3 formal things we do. In kindergarten, first, second, we check the letters, uppercase, lowercase, letter sounds, phonics knowledge. We do a spelling assessment that continues on through all the grades. And we do a reading assessment, which is called a running record. So we have books that are leveled. That's how the kids learn how to read from level to level. We sit one-on-one with them for these assessments. We introduce a book to them to see if that's their level. And these are formal as far as there's a folder that follows a kid through all the grades where we keep all of this in writing. We also have some assessments we do in math. This is individual to classrooms. Shaquan, my co-teacher, and I wrote a math assessment of some basic skills that we wanted to know if kids have them, if they don't have them. Again, that's one-on-one with each child. We also do some assessments that we create for specific units that we teach. So this fall we taught a unit on data collection and analysis, and we created a rubric for that so that we could assess the children along each step of the process of collecting data, using a system, creating a graph, and a rubric just sets out, here are the things that we're going to ask a child to do, and then sort of what we're looking for. I think, I'm just want to add to what Wanda said, observation and working alongside children is really the most important assessments for us. Even going ice skating, I was thinking about this because we recently went, and I was able to see my students learn something new and sort of tackle it. And one student in particular was just couldn't stay up to save her life, but just went out there running, falling, twisting, laughing, getting up again, killing herself basically. And then by the end, she was sort of doing it. And I didn't know this about this student. And I have a new perspective now, and I'm able to bring that back to the classroom. So I've already, said to her, remember how you learned how to ice skate? How you just went and did it and you kept falling? That's what you're going to do with reading. You're just going to keep trying. Be brave like you were in ice skating. And so that kind of assessment you don't get in a standardized test or staying in the classroom even. But that's what we're trying to do, basically, is build a relationship with the student and use that relationship to teach them. If they know that you care about them, that you know what their favorite things are, for example. So I have a different student who is very timid at writing, very nervous, very stressed out when it's writing time, but he loves superheroes. So that's what we're going to write about. And we write in comic form with speech bubbles. And that's what got him writing. So these are things I wouldn't know if I didn't have a lot of time to spend alongside the students. And also, just one more thing about the formal assessments, it's a lot of one-on-one, takes a lot of time, and that it's critical that we have small class sizes. If the class sizes are too big, first of all, the one-on-one can't really happen, not just for assessment, but even just to sit alongside them. I think that's all I want to say for now.
My turn. No, it's fine. It's okay. Thank you. Actually, I'm going to use this hand. Okay, so in second and third grade, we do a lot of what Diane and Wanda talked about. Actually, all through the grades, we do those formal assessments. So we do a spelling assessment 3 times a year. We do running records 3 times a year. So those are sort of the formal things. But then in reading, writing, and math, we're also doing a lot of what we would call like informal conferencing. So every day during independent reading time, I'm reading one-on-one with a child. That's called a conference. And it's it's a book that they've chosen. I'm watching what they're doing in the moment. We're talking about what they're doing as a reader, and then I'm giving them like one teaching point. Oh, I noticed you did this. Now next time, why don't you try to do this as well? And then I'm documenting that. I'm taking notes on what we discussed. Same with writing. When the kids are writing, we're sitting down next to them. Ideally, you'll meet with every kid every week. It's hard. It depends on the week. But again, we're looking at their work. Can you read me what you're working on? Okay, let's talk about it. I noticed that you're doing this. Now let's try doing this. And then again, I document that. I think another thing that's really important that we do is like Wanda said, is we're constantly looking at work samples. So, at the end of a week, I'm getting all the kids writing and I'm reading through it. I'm looking through it. We have rubrics that we use. So, I might be looking at if that week we were working on elaboration, right? I'm looking to see which kids are elaborating and how. And then based on what I'm noticing, I am tailoring the following week's instruction. So if 17 kids really nailed the elaboration, adding details or writing with dialogue, then next week I'm probably not going to do a lesson on elaboration and dialogue. I'll pull those 4 or 5 kids that are struggling or need an extra push, but with the rest of the class, we'll move on. So looking at student work is really, really important. Same in math. We use the Engaged New York curriculum, a version of it. And so at least in second and third grade, we give the end of module assessments to see if they've mastered the content that we've taught so far. But again, looking at work is really important, gathering their work. I think for me in math, it's often, I would say, look at their math work every day or every other day, so more often than I do for writing. And I'll kind of sell myself out here, but it was a couple weeks ago, there was this lesson, so some of my parents probably know, where the kids had to, they had to count using money from one number to another, and then they had to document their counts on a number line. And after the lesson, I had a feeling that it didn't go that well, and there was a lot of confusion. And then, so after the lesson, I was like, oh God. So I took all their papers, and basically there was a pile of like 18 kids that did not understand the lesson, and then there were 3 who definitely did. So I was like, okay, I need to reteach. And so that's another way. Looking at their work definitely informs the decisions that we make in the classroom. Like, instead of moving on to lesson 19, I retaught lesson 18. And I told the kids, like, sometimes we need to reteach things if I didn't teach you well enough. And then just again, to piggyback off of what Wanda and Diane were saying, we're constantly observing the kids. So like work time, almost like ice skating, is another great way to look at the kids' kind of work habits. How do they troubleshoot? How do they deal with frustration? What's their relationship like to peers? And again, we're taking notes. Another thing is, as a person who teaches alone, I try to document our conversations just on chart paper, and I'll write their names in parentheses. And even that gives you information, right? I can see which kids are participating in every single conversation, which kids haven't participated at all. Maybe I need to check in with them. Is it because they're shy, or is it because they're confused, or what's going on there? So yeah, just to reiterate that it's ongoing. In fact, it's constant.
So I am the 4th and 5th grade teacher. My name is Joanne, and thankfully I could say that we all do the same thing in our classrooms. So in 4th and 5th grade, we also do running records. We do a spelling assessment as well, and typically when I do the running records with my students, I also have a little conference. What are you reading now? What are your favorite types of books? And as I'm doing the assessment, somebody might tell me, oh, I love to read graphic novels, and maybe they haven't moved up. And I'm noticing that they're having a hard time with inferencing. So right then and there, I can have a conversation with the student and just say, a lot of the books you're reading have lots of pictures to help you support understanding what's going on in the story. Can we try, after you're done with this book, reading a chapter book? And then I'll give them a suggestion. So right there, as I'm assessing, I know a little bit more about the student, and I'm able to give them notes right then and there of how they can further their reading. In writing, we have a lot of rubrics in our classroom. So every week the students have writing assignments, and then on Friday we choose one writing assignment, and there's a rubric that we glue inside. We tell the kids, we circle off all the things that they did well, punctuation, adding dialogue, whatever that might be, and then we have comments of what we'd like to see them doing next week. And then we have the kids go back. A huge part of our assessments is having the kids reflect on their work. So they go back and they say, what were you proudest of? Where do you think you need to make improvements, and that sort of thing. So a lot in the 4th and 5th grade is reflection and pure work. So another thing that I like to do in math is we do the Engage New York, so we do have the end of module assessments. But just recently, because we have these narratives coming up, and I wanted to see how the kids felt about it. So I gave them one question on each concept that we've learned throughout the year, but right in the beginning, I gave them the checklist of what's going to be on the narrative, and I asked them, how do you feel about what you've done? Where do you think that you've been strong, or where you need improvement? And it's really interesting to watch, because as I'm going through these to write my narratives, I see that they and I are on the same page. Another way that I assess in math is, say a student is absent, I'll say to the class, who feels comfortable teaching them what they missed yesterday? And whatever hands shoot up, okay, they at least feel confident, and then I'll put an ear out, and can they teach it? Because that's the biggest thing. It's not whether I can teach them a concept, is can you go out and then teach it to somebody else? So I feel like in the 4th and 5th grade, it's really lovely because there's a lot of self-monitoring. The kids are reflecting on their own work, and that's helping guide us in our lessons and in our assessments. There was one other thing I wanted to add about the writing assessments. Oh, we do like peer editing, so we have a rubric, and the students get to check off like how they feel they did on a writing assignment, and then they have a friend read it, which we found originally was just the student and the teacher, but then we realized that kids were more likely to add periods and write neater if they knew their friend was going to have to read it. So we added peer editing into it, and so now we have a rubric where the kids analyze how they did, and then they have a friend read it and they do it, and then we take a look at it and we assess it to make sure that we're all on the same page and we all understand what does it mean to add dialogue, what does it mean to know when to change a paragraph, and doing these rubrics is really helpful in that.
Can I ask, can one of the earlier childhood people talk a little bit about, I think one thing that, go ahead.
Thank you so much.
I think one thing that is sort of unique, and when we think about with the neighborhood schools, that children sort of know themselves as learners, the ways in which kids, like what Joanne was talking about, the ways in which kids kind of are, I don't want to use the word assessing their own work, but thinking about their own work or thinking about their friends' work.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking, oh, I didn't say that when Joanne was talking about it. So we start off when they're really young, getting them to think about their work, what they did, why they chose it. We ask them, usually it's around work time, so things that they've created, or if they're in the dramatic play area, what they like to do in that area. We sort of interview them, and they're familiar with that. We're like, oh, come here, I'm going to interview you. So we'll ask them, so what did you make today? What did you use to make that? How did you get that to stick to this or that? They also will share their work with the class. And then once one kid does that, they all pretty much want to do that. Can I share this with the class? And they show the class, here's what I made today. And then also we start with the family conferences where we have the child leads the conference. So they choose the stories that they want to share with the parent. And they sort of lead the conference, sharing their favorite math game, sharing their story that they wrote, reading a book to their family. It's tricky when they're young. We're just getting them started of thinking about, well, why, we always ask them, why did you choose this story? Because I like it. Why do you like it? Because I like it, so sometimes, but that's okay because we're getting them used to that idea of like, look at your own work. It's not just the teacher that's going to tell you, good job. You can look at it and say what you did well. I think Wanda wanted to talk to that too.
So we have something that is called work time meetings, and that's like our show and tell with the little ones. So whenever, and some parents here can attest to that because I've sent videos where the child not just creates something during work time, but they have to talk about it. And as time goes by, they first start with, yeah, I did it because I like it. But then when their classmates start making questions like, why? And why did you choose that color? It makes them think and reflect and use words and expanding their knowledge and in language skills, also in public speaking. So that is a very great way to start in thinking about what they're doing. It's not just I played over here, but what did I do? Why did I choose this material? What can I do next? And a great example that I have is a child that created something that she called the helicopter. And she was telling this story about a mermaid that it was in the helicopter. And, at the end of their presentation, they have to ask any questions or comments. One of the comments that this child got was like, aren't mermaids supposed to be in water? She paused and she thought. And then she said, yeah, but this mermaid can also turn into human. So, but it makes them think. And then another child said, that really does not look like a helicopter.
Your son, Thomas. I just
That really-
I
yes.
read the narrative report, and I was
Yeah.
really struck by that they're having conversations with each other,
So-
but not in a bad way.
No,
'cause then
they
what did he
take-
say? He said something else.
Yes, he said, you did a great job,
But
but it doesn't look like a helicopter. So then the other child just said, I just did the best I could. So it's that type of thing that gets them. This is great tools for them to use later on in the upper grades, and also stand up for themselves, have conversations, acquire knowledge, acquire language. There's so much going on there, and also self-pride. They're very proud of their work and they want to talk about it. So that's what I wanted to share.
And I also just wanted to add on something that struck me, not here, but that I just want to share, which is sometimes assessment drives, as the teachers were saying, it drives sort of instruction for next steps in terms of skills and knowledge, but sometimes it also determines content. And I was meeting with Jane, who was talking about her writing this year, and usually in the 2-3s we start off with narrative writing, and it's a story from your life, and that's very basic. That's sort of where people start because you're learning about each other. And Jane noticed that her kids were really interested in graphic novels, and more students were interested in graphic novels. And so, you can talk about it as well, but it was so powerful to me. So instead of doing narrative writing, she felt like I can't stop graphic novels writing. That's like taking over my project time and say that's not real writing. Real writing is narrative writing because graphic novels and that kind of writing is writing. And so she ended up doing a graphic novel study for her writing, and they're about to publish. Jane was out. What day were you out? Friday? Friday, yeah. Jane was out Friday, and Anthony. No, was it Anthony? Were you out Friday or Thursday? Thursday. Anthony was sorry. We got a lot of coverages for narrative report writing, and Anthony was covering, and he said at the end of the day it was graphic novel writing time, and he goes, I couldn't believe it. It was the last hour of the day, and they were so focused, they were so on task, and they were really invested. And this is an example, I think, of where sometimes teachers will take the lead, not just in terms of skills and knowledge, but in terms of the content. And that will be where the teacher follows the children and then supports that, knowing that she's teaching those important skills and knowledge and through this particular content area. So that really struck me. Questions? Does anyone else want to say something or add on to anything?
I want to say something
Okay.
else.
Then I got you, Ellie.
So I'm going to say this as a parent myself. So as a parent, I gather a lot of information for, a progressive school, and I use it as a tool later on. And when I say later on, I'm talking about college, because I have 2 college students. My kids are in college right now, and whenever there is an issue, I give them those tools. I say, okay, have you spoke to your teacher about observing your work over time? Have you give them evidence of what you've been doing, how much effort you've been doing? So these are, parents, I'm going to tell you, these are very important tools for you to bring with you, put it in a bag, and say, I'm going to take it out when I need it. Because chances are you will need it later on. Of course.
How are we doing?
They can put the mic up there. Pick up the question.
So I have a son, Harper, in 4th, 5th grade. He's in 4th grade. And so I've found that as they get older, because you're less engaged in the classroom and less present, really, and then there's all the other stuff about getting information from your kid kind of thing. Because there isn't homework that comes back with comments, because there aren't obvious benchmarks, et cetera, all the things that we love, but also get more and more abstract for a parent as the kid gets more distant, I'm struggling with how to get a sort of a real grasp on what's happening in the classroom and sort of gauge where I think he is. You know what I mean? I don't know what the line of communication is supposed to be, really, at that point in 4th grade. But
yeah. Well, I have a 4th grader at home as well, so I know that it's impossible to get any information out of them. Oh, thank you. So I think that it depends on classroom to classroom on the feedback that you get on a weekly basis. But I will say that the narrative does reveal a lot about your child and where they stand and where their preferences are and where they need to be. I think that if
Harper wasn't reaching those benchmarks at this point, you probably would have been informed, but you'll have a better understanding of what's happening once that narrative report comes out, which I'm sure that you've seen them in the past and you're quite familiar with them. I will say that with my daughter, she typically just gets a regular report card, and it's funny because I taught in traditional schools for a very long time, and now I've been at the neighborhood school for 8 years, I think, and I looked at her report card. I'm like, what does this tell me? This tells me nothing. I know nothing about what you do in school now. And just this past marking period, they started adding narratives. But even their narratives were just kind of like telling me what was happening in the curriculum and still not giving me much more information. So I think that, yeah, it's kind of hard to get into our fourth graders' mind and figure out what's happening for them. But like I said, I think that if there was something where they're not reaching their benchmarks, parents are going to be reached out. There's going to be like, oh, we're having some concern, or they haven't been handing in homework, adequate homework, even if they are handing it in, but it's not adequate for 3 weeks now. You're going to get those calls and that sort of thing. And I know that it's hard to say, like, just to be patient for that narrative, because it does come at the beginning of February, and that's a long time. But you will get a lot of information in that.
It's twice a year, right?
Yeah, it's twice a year. We also, in our next series, Peter, you can clarify if this is right, I think so in my brain, we're having former students come back. It's going to be an evening conversation with families, and they're going to talk about their experiences in middle school and beyond, and how the neighborhood school experience prepared them for that. So that's going to be something that I think this idea of like, okay, yes, are they going to be ready? That's not exactly what you're asking, Emily, but that does kind of lend itself to, I think, this conversation.
Just to follow, are we meant to sort of have a weekly information?
No.
Because I remember in the younger grades we got a sort of a newsletter every week or something that.
It's usually twice a month, and if that's not happening, then you need to reach out to me and talk to me about it. Yeah.
I wonder if Joanne or Dyanthe could talk about how the assessments are formalized in terms of what goes to a middle school. I know you have there was the pilot program, the alternative assessment program. If you could talk about, you've mostly been talking about how it's useful for parents and how we find out, but what gets passed on.
Yeah, I think what we've really been talking about is how it's useful for teachers and for children, and how it informs the work in the classroom, and how it informs children's understanding of themselves as learners and people. So what we do is I'd say the majority, other than some of the more progressive elementary schools that are a part of a cohort that we're a part of called PROS, they enter grades into something called STARS. And STARS tracks your child's grades from the time they are in kindergarten all the way up and through the time that they graduate, depending on the kind of school that you have decided to go to. And so what we do is there is a report card that gets sent to middle schools, and it gets sent, I guess, what is it, like December? No, it's like November of the fifth grade year. And teachers actually gather together in the fall because they've had their students, or even if they hadn't, we pull all the teachers, the fourth and fifth grade teachers. Emily, I don't think Teddy's there because I'm not sure if that's a component of it, but I think he does look it over. And they take their end of year narrative report from fourth grade, but also the fifth grade's work and who the child has become or who they are in this couple of months can inform that also. And they're very, I wish I had an example of it, but it'll just say like ELA, and then you have to say 1, 2, 3, or 4. But we use a different kind of language. There's a ton of different ways in which you can sort of rate the child. It sort of all boils down to 1, 2, 3, and 4. We use the language that we think is most aligned, which is exceeds expectation, meets expectation, I don't know, below probably expectation, which is not, I mean, one thing that I was really struck by.
Oh, no, it was approaching expectation
Approaching.
and development.
Yeah.
Developing, okay, thank you. Joanne filled them in. You were there, looking at them. Yeah. So in Joanne's case, Joanne and Sophia, their kids were actually sort of new to them this year. They had some kids that they'd had 2 years ago. So Mara and Caroline had filled those out, but then Joanne and Sophia looked them over. And then that information is then sent along with if your child takes a state test, the state test scores are on there, their attendance is on there, if your child has an IEP, an individual education plan, that's on there too. And then that gets sent to the schools, and the schools will look at that information, all of that, in their report card. Is that what you were asking, Emily?
Yes, I
Yeah.
thought it would be useful.
Yes,
for
I know we only have a couple of fourth grade families, but we have families that are getting up there.
To know how much information is going, and if you choose to opt out, then what the middle schools are finding out.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, we'll talk more about that. District 1 middle schools don't look at the tests. That's not a factor in their criteria at all. They do look at the report card, and attendance is a huge piece. Those are big things. Attendance is a huge piece. That's
You said they don't look at the test?
they
Not
don't.
if you don't
not
have
District 1. They don't. If you don't take the test, it doesn't make any difference in
Why is
District
it
1.
included?
It's just part of the-
It's on the DOE record.
It's a DOE.
There's no choice.
It's a DOE report card. It's a DOE. It's for the entire system. Any other questions, Jenny?
I'm just curious, since this came up, do parents know how their kids are rated?
Yes. Yeah, that's something
What's
that
being sent?
absolutely. So that's something that we send home before. Well, actually now it's online, so they can go online and see. But that was something that a couple of years ago became clear, is that families do need to sort of have a sense of is this aligned with their end of year progress report card from fourth grade? Because that's really what it is supposed to be. Looking at the end of year fourth grades, and so yes, that's shared online with families.
That's just done for fourth grade, not for the earlier grades?
Right. For the earlier grades, and actually for all of our grades, we just do pass-fail. That's our way of kind of opting out of the system, and that's what the other progressive elementary schools do. We're thinking about shifting to uploading our narrative reports into STARS, but I'm not sure if that's going to work, but that's something that we're thinking about. Again, we're always, as progressive elementary schools, we're always the thorn in their side a little bit, because we want to do things that feel more authentic. We don't want to say our kids are 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? We want to think about it in the complex ways in which we do think about children, and hope that could shift some thinking about that actual system.
But I think that when you're applying to the next level, right, from elementary to middle or middle to high school, they're always taking just a piece of the previous. They're looking at 7th grade, or whatever the semester is or the year is.
7th grade, right, for high school.
That's how the DOE does it. So there are these like higher stakes moments for whatever reason. They never look at the whole record.
And I think that's just because logistically they can't process those test scores. I mean, really, I don't want my 4th grader to be ready for middle school. I want my 5th grader to be ready for middle school in May. And I have no expectation that my 4th grader is ready for middle school when they take the tests in May or whenever it is. So the only reason why it's like that is because the system is huge, and there's not really a turnaround time to be actually able to look at 5th grade performance. And that as a school, we are working to think about an alternative performance-based assessment that will actually sort of have our children sort of share what they know, both in ELA, social studies, and in math, in 5th grade, in the 2nd semester. And then we can say, yeah, you're ready to go. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, teachers, so much.